Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank
Yes.
It's a real privilege for me to be on the other side of the listening to speaking. Thank you, Vani and Vasu, for this opportunity, and also to all the audience. I know a large number of my friends, well-wishers, colleagues, and people whom I have cared for are in the audience. I owe all of what I'm going to share with you to all of these people who have contributed to it. Today is a very important day to discuss this idea of spirituality and health in general and mental health in particular, because yesterday was Guru Purnima. What a fantastic coincidence, which we didn't know at that time when we were deciding on the day. And that is a time when we remember the teachers as well as spiritual gurus. What I'm going to do is to share with you my own personal journey with four religions. I born a Hindu, studied in a Christian college for about 8 years, lived in Chandigarh, learned about Sikhism for about 10 years, then lived in Islamic countries for about 4 years, and all of these things taught me a lot of things. And I will bring those things to your consideration. Before I do that, I want to share with you that India has a unique opportunity to contribute to health and mental health, particularly in the area of spirituality. I want to recall the quotation of Sri Aurobindo: pain is the key that opens the gates of strength. Pain is the key that opens the gates of strength. It is the high road that leads to the city of beatitude. What a beautiful way of looking at pain, suffering as a way path to self-realization. We'll come back to that again and again. However, I want to point out to you the type of a unity that we have in India between the body and mind doesn't exist in the rest of the world, particularly the Western world. In the Western world, a philosopher by name Descartes in the 17th century brought a division between the body and mind. It occurred for a very pathological, looking back, a pathological reason. Before the 17th century, church was everything in the Western world, church, the Islamic religion, other things. But as science started advancing, philosophers got frightened that science will wipe out the mind from the body. So they said at that point, he and the Roman Catholic Church struck a deal. As a man of science, Descartes would restrict himself to the study of human anatomy, leaving the mind and soul to the care of the church. Today, we are talking about the unity of the mind and the body. I'm sure he would be turning in his grave looking at these things. After many things which I learned, one of the things which impressed me when I was doing my psychiatry in Chandigarh was in Sikhism, there is a term called Charji Kala, that is a positive attitude, eternal optimism and joy, acceptance that life ebbs and flows with hardship, and to see above that adversity is the goal of all life. Now, you might be thinking that we in India are preoccupied with religion, spirituality. You have seen it in the politicals, including today's discussions in the parliament, whether it's about everything. But very interestingly, this month, a number of international journals are looking at health and spirituality in a very positive manner. Let me just give a few examples. For example, July 3rd, a series of articles came in the New York Times with the title, "Are we in the middle of a spiritual awakening?" Lots of Americans are losing their religion but turning to spirituality. Nature, one of the best, most respected scientific journal, had this on the July 4th issue of this year. Neuroscientists must not be afraid to study religion. Scientists interested in the brain have tended to avoid studying that needs to be changed. We need to study the spiritual, religious aspects of the brain, is the call by Nature, which had made similar call about 5 years back, where it said religion and science can have a true dialogue. I'm making these points to say what we are talking about is of international importance, international focus, not just the thought of people in one corner of Bangalore. Similarly, Lancet, in one of the recent issues, said the role and contribution of compassionate communities. The word compassionate communities is significant. All of you know about yoga, meditation, which has taken over the world, mainly because of the changing world as well as the popularity brought out by our Prime Minister. But let me tell you 3 stories to make the point that spirituality and health are very closely linked. All of us know for health, particularly cardiac health, taking statins is one of the very common things. There are in America itself to prevent occurrence of heart attacks and decrease the cholesterol level. And it's one of the most popularly used drugs. Do you know this month, the Journal of American Medical Association published a paper of the value of gratitude, which is as useful to prevent the heart problems as statins are. Let me explain the story. This is a study of, there is a longitudinal study going on of nurses to see what happens to these people, what decides their health, what decides what type of factors make it worse. About 10 years back, they said, let's plug into this particular cohort or the group of people, thousands of people, a gratitude dimension. So they administered gratitude scale, a 6-item scale, and categorized them as high on gratitude or low on gratitude based on the score of 42 score. And they followed them up for about 8 to 9 years. And they had large number of people dying, large number of developing cancer, large number of developing heart problems. What was very striking about this paper in JAMA this month is that the people who were high in gratitude had 10% less mortality, that means death due to cardiac problems, compared to the ones who were low in the gratitude scale. Now, this is if it was a drug, it would have been written up as a fantastic breakthrough. Because, as I said, the statins provide nearly as much or little more than this at the cost of taking medicine, side effects, and others. Here is something which is gratitude, and I'll talk about how you practice gratitude. What were they asking in this idea of gratitude? Very simple questions. 4 positive questions, 2 negative questions. Because many of you will say, my God, what is this mantra that you are talking about which is so effective? It is simply the positive questions are, I have so much in life to be thankful. If I had to last everything that I have felt grateful, it would be a very long list. I have to list everything that I have felt grateful. I have to turn it this one. What the negative one is, when I look at the world, I don't see much to be grateful for. 2 other positive ones, I'm grateful to a wide variety of people. As I get older, I find myself more able to appreciate the people, events, situations that can bear part of my life journey. Negative one is large amounts of time can go by before I feel grateful to something or someone. Very simple questions that leads to an item of 42. It's a 7-point scale. And if you are high on the scores, that is, if you score high on 1, 2, 4, and 5, you would have a chance of 10% less of developing a cardiac problem than a person with a low score. The next study was again this month in another journal of cancer patients. It titled Predictors of Forgiveness in Cancer Patients After Treatment. What they did was similar to the gratitude. They took about 128 cancer patients. They administered a 18-item forgiveness scale, 6 of them relating to forgiveness of self, 6 to others, 6 to situations. And again, they found, got a score, and they found that the level of forgiveness was related to the quality of life, the longevity, as well as the distress they felt because of cancer. Again, forgiveness was a very positive resource for cancer patients to handle the challenges that they face as part of the cancer journey. I'll tell you about the questions a little later, how they are this one. The third story is equally important. We have a neurological condition which, when diagnosed, people live, 50% live only for about 2 years. This mindset, and they developed a treatment called acceptance commitment therapy. That means teaching the people how to accept their life situation and to say, this is not the end of my life. I will live in a mindful manner. I will be motivated to make the best of my time, and I will adopt their lifestyle changes. And when they did this, they did it in about 6 to 9, they did it in about 8 sessions of 1 hour each. And when they followed up these people for 6 months and 9 months, at the end of it, those who received this treatment compared to the controls who received only routine treatment did better in terms of better quality of life, decreased anxiety, depression, and a greater satisfaction of living with their life. Now, each one of them, if it was a treatment, drug, the pharmaceutical agencies and others would have jumped to cash upon it and make millions out of it. But here was something which is there in our community, which has made a big difference in cancer, in cardiac problems, in neurological problems. Now, I want to stop at this point of time to move away a little bit to a number of you who are not medical people. How did this change occur in the last 200, 300 years? I want to give you some highlights of it and bring you to say that medicine, both the physical medicine and psychological medicine and spiritual medicine, are coming together. Till about the 15th, 16th century, much of it was thought of as occurring due to religious reasons, either the devil or the evil or the various other things. In psychiatry particularly, we looked at most mental illnesses as due to the witches. As a matter of fact, the Catholic Church had a book called Malleus Maleficorum, called Witches' Hammer, which identified mentally ill people as witches, and the church authorized them to be killed, drowned, hanged, and driven away. That was there for about 300 years. And much of it was a deviancy model in the minds of the people. There came, of course, as all of you know, in the physical world, in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, we ended up with the germ theory, which explained tuberculosis, cholera, plague, and we entered into vitamins, medicines, then went into blood groups, then we went into antibiotics, vaccines, and large number of medicines. We are in a world which is very different than what it was about 3 centuries back. But about 100 years back, something very dramatic happened. A scientist by name Vellore came up with a different theory of illness called the stress theory. What is stress theory? The body has a whole lot of activities which are going on automatically, what is called the autonomous nervous system. One, to maintain our bodily functions like digestion, heart, breathing, and other things. Other one, to handle the stress, the sympathetic system. He postulated that the stress is a very beneficial thing to handle emergencies, but when the stress continues, becomes chronic stress, it leads to illness dimensions. This was a very interesting new way of looking at it, and this found true evidence in a study which was done in America, which is again a very interesting story. You know, in America, in the Navy, they have these submarines. These nuclear submarines go under the water, stay underwater for 9 months at a time, And those people who are about 800 to 900 people in each one of them don't see the ground, see the land, except at the end of the 9 months. So everything they need has to be available on the submarine, in the submarine. So they make a special effort to see that they are all healthy before they get into the submarine. But as it happens, some people develop problems, they have to be operated, someone gets appendicitis, someone develops a fracture, someone develops anemia.
Good evening, everybody. I think we have temporarily lost Dr. Srinivasa Murthy's connection. He should be back any moment. Please stay online. Sir, if you are able to hear me, can you log off and log in? Because we aren't able to hear you. You're visible on the screen. Your video is off, and we aren't able to hear you. We'll just give a couple of minutes for Dr. Srinivas Murthy to join. I think he has some technical issues. Yeah. We are trying to get in touch with Dr. Srinivas Murthy. I think his connection is lost. Just give us a minute, please. Somebody has raised the hand. Thank you, sir. I think you have joined on the other phone. You can now unmute and speak, sir. We lost your connection. You're actually visible on the other phone, but meaning but we lost your video and audio on the other phone. So if you can just tilt this phone, I think you can continue, resume from where you are.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'm extremely sorry about this. My apologies. So this was I was telling you about the study done with the Navy people. What happened was, when they were looking at all the things, they came up with a very surprising finding that what determined the illness in the submarine was not what was happening inside the submarine, but what had happened to these people before they entered the submarine. That means during the time, 6 to 9 months when they were on the land, if they had many life events, those life events increase the risk of them developing the physical illnesses. Interestingly, the more number of life events they had, the more severe was the illness. They identified 42 things and they called it a life event scale. And this is a very well recognized thing that when you are going through difficult times, come together, a proverb that we all know of it, and has led on to a large number of interventions relating to resilience, post-traumatic growth. I'll talk about that in a minute. Simultaneous to this awareness of life events, both good and bad life events have a likely negative effect, particularly if the person is not able to see it in a positive manner. The other area where work occurred, which changed our thinking, was the First and the Second World War and the Vietnam War. As all of you know, these were brutal wars, and about a third of the people who were in the war came down with a condition called post-traumatic stress disorder, in which the person felt as though he was experiencing what happened in the war, was afraid of similar stimulation, lost emotions, and was preoccupied with the events, and very disabling. And they found that the greater the exposure, the more severe the condition. Much more than that, they found that if they had a childhood trauma, the chances of them developing a PTSD was greater. But as it happens with all adversity, as I quoted Sri Aurobindo, pain is the gateway. They also found that number of people, 2/3 of the people were resilient. Not only that, about a half of them developed what we call it as post-traumatic growth. That means they flourished under the experience of adversity, and then they developed methods by which we can increase post-traumatic growth and other things. I will come back to that in a minute. One other thing that happened around the same time was the learning theories. All of you have heard of Pavlov, that stimulus response, and that led to a preoccupation with the learning theory. But a scientist by name Alexander came up and said it's not just the link between the event and the response. Much more important is the meaning we give it to it. Again, another story I will tell you. What he did was very innovative. He got together a large group of students. 1/3 of them were exposed to one type of they were all exposed to one video of an accident in a factory of woodcutters, where accidentally one person's hand gets cut. The first group, they told this is a training video. Second group, they gave the instruction saying that this is all actors. Third group, they said this is real. One would have expected, seeing the same video, all the three groups would have been distressed, reacted in the same way. But actually the third group reacted adversely much more than others, because they gave the meaning saying that is something terrible has happened, and they experienced the trauma of it in reality, while the first and the second people didn't. And that came up with the idea of what we call as the meaning making. Simultaneously, as you would have heard of, Freud entered into the picture around the beginning of the century to say that it is not the supernatural factors which cause illness, it is the person himself responsible. What he called it as psychic determinism. And he said that childhood experiences can be traumatic and cause the problems for the person to develop problems. And as all of you know, he developed a very interesting, very novel, non-medicine oriented intervention called psychoanalysis, where the person recalled his early childhood experiences, re-experienced those experiences, and through the therapist developed an alternative way of understanding it and got rid of the illness. This was psychoanalysis. Unfortunately, it was a very lengthy experience. It was 5 days a week for a couple of years, and not everyone could afford it. So in the 1970s, 80s, there a group of people came up and said, can we shorten it? Can we do this reimagining, re-understanding, rediscovering oneself in a different manner than what is happening in psychoanalysis? And they came up with a therapy called cognitive behavior therapy. This is now the #1 treatment for depression and a number of other problems like drug addiction and other things. What is cognitive behavior therapy? It is essentially saying that the person who is not well because he is interpreting his life situation in a negative manner. And by teaching the person to change his perception, he can get rid of the illness and get on with his life. As meditation circle participants, all of us will immediately say, hey, this is what Krishna did to Arjuna. All of us know in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, Arjuna says that I can't fight, I'm going to kill my relatives, they are going to become orphans, they are going to become widows, and I'm going to cause a lot of suffering. What did Krishna do? He didn't say what you are doing is wrong. He changed his thinking. I'm abbreviating it in a very, very condensed manner by saying, you have to do your dharma as a Kshatriya. You are not killing, it is their fate. More than that, your job is to do your duty, not to look for the results. Karmannadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadatam. And more than that, he showed him Virat Swarup to say, all of this is Maya, all of this is because of me, and don't worry about your action and get on with your action. In a way, 5,000 years back, the cognitive behavior therapy was developed, practiced, and was shown to be effective. I'm going to come to why this is relevant to what we are talking about today in spirituality in a minute. So, what we have seen is that in the last 100 years, particularly from the early 20th century, we have moved away from a supernatural causation to a physical, psychological causation. Now you will say, where does spirituality come? Here comes another story which is of a fantastic nature. Forgive me for exaggeration. All of you would have heard of Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn. She got the Nobel Prize about 15 years back for her discovery of a part of the chromosome called telomeres. Telomeres are at the end of the chromosomes. Chromosomes are the genetic material. As we grow old, these chromosomes become shorter and shorter and shorter. And when they become very short, we die. So her discovery was very important, and that got her the Nobel Prize. But very interesting twist to the whole thing was, when she was working on this one, a psychologist came and said, I want to see what happens to my group of people who are working with me, who are caregivers. And they did a study and followed up a group of caregivers who are looking after children with special needs, the people with dementia in the family. And lo and behold, what Dr. Blackburn and her team found was, the longer the person was a caregiver, the shorter was the telomere. That means they were aging very fast. We know caregiving is very stressful, but it can cause premature aging was new. But there was a twist to the story. The story was not complete because there were people who did not have shortening of the telomeres. When they went back and looked at them, two things came up. When the caregiver thought of the activity as a positive one, not a burden, but an opportunity to serve, to show love, and to find meaning and purpose, those people's telomere did not shorten. Further, if the persons were practicing meditation 10 to 12 minutes per day, their telomeres did not get shorter. So we have now a link between the body and mind, not at an imaginary level, but at the level of the biology. This now has gone further into immunity. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, about COVID. So what I have done so far is to say to all of you that the issue of health is not just physical, not just psychological, not just social, but also spiritual. And all of these things are interrelated, Not that they work in different dimensions. Spiritual when you go to temple, mosque, or a church, and physical when you are eating, or psychological when you are interacting with people, social when you are in a group. No, they are all integrated, interrelated, and influence each other. Now, the question that will come up from you is that, is spirituality improve health? There is enormous amount of research again in the last 20 years. 20 years back, if the number of papers published about spirituality, religion was something like 100, 200, today it goes into thousands. It is one of the most researched topic in the world because, as I said, I talked to you about gratefulness, I talked to you about gratitude. This is a thing which is available to everyone, no side effects, not costly, now no cost at all. And so people have looked at it. What are the findings? Number one, people who are spiritual live at least about 10 years longer compared to those who are not spiritual. Number two, all the chronic illnesses, diabetes, hypertension, joint problems, cancers, dementia, all of these things are much less compared to those who are not spiritual. Much more important, terrible conditions like addictions, suicide are less in spiritual people than non-spiritual people. It will come to you as a surprise that the latest Oxford textbook of suicidology, it is the go-to book with about 50 chapters, starts with 10 chapters of spirituality to begin with, because suicide is seen as a spiritual crisis, besides other things due to mental illness, social problems, and other things. Similarly, people who have spiritual have more stable marriages, less crime, and have better adjustment and satisfaction from their life. Number of other illnesses like stroke. Hello? Hello? Sorry, there was a number of other conditions are also related to this one. Now, let me talk a little bit about what is the evidence of chronic illnesses relating to spirituality. Now, all of us are aware of the COVID. We've all gone through it. COVID actually provides a window or a mirror to the value of spirituality in health and illness. Why do I say this? For example, they found that COVID vulnerability is linked to 3 or 4 factors: whether the persons were exercising before, whether the persons were sleeping well or not, whether they had practices like yoga, meditation, whether they were socially connected. All of these things are protective of COVID. And those who develop COVID, if they were spiritual, in point of fact, there is a very interesting paper from Wuhan, where the virus possibly originated, and they found that even in Wuhan, if the people were using mindfulness, they had less chance of developing, or if they developed, less chance of developing serious illness, and if they develop serious illness, less chance of dying. Very impressive evidence to show that spirituality is protective. Similarly, the studies from Yoga Center in Jigini has shown by a phone survey that people who are practicing various types of yoga meditation were relatively protected. Not that it was a cure or a solution, but there was a decreased risk of developing COVID-related issues in their life. The other area where lots of work has occurred is caregivers. I did mention a little bit about it. What is the reason for caregivers to be benefited by spirituality? I'll tell you what we did in Bangalore. I used to be a volunteer psychiatrist for the Association for Mentally Challenged in near Kidwai, just next to NIMHANS. And during COVID, we wanted to strengthen the families to cope with the problems. But when we offered help, they did not reach out. So we reached out to them and did a survey to see whether their emotional health is like other people in the community or more. And as expected, we found them to be highly stressed because they had to take care of themselves, they had to take care of the special child, and also all the other problems. So then we said, can we decrease their stress? When we try to offer to them, come when you have problems, hardly or no one came. So we asked them, what is it that you are interested? They said, doctor, if you can do something for me to live for my child longer, I would be very happy. They were more concerned about living longer so that they are the best security for their child. So we said, let us develop a program of positive health and positive mental health. And we developed a program called Enrich. And we had a program is available. And if you send me, my email is on the chat, and I will send you the thing. What we did was we put together a program of exercise, sleep, meditation, connectedness, nutrition to make them healthy. And to handle their distress, we identified 5 activities which they can do: sharing feelings, journaling, listening to music, thinking differently, and spirituality. Each one of them, we converted them not as a prescription, but a practice. You will see when you have a look at this book, you will see that we say, what is it? Why is it important? What will happen if you do it? And how you can do it? And how other people have done it. And we did a training program for people. It's available both in English and Kannada. For any one of you who would like to have it, we would be happy to sell. One was the spirituality. And as I said, we have not evaluated it, but similar programs have been evaluated in other centers and shown to be effective in caregivers of number of conditions like dementia, special children, cancer, and other places. One other area where this has occurred is cancer. This area is very, very special to me. As Vasu pointed out, this month I have published a paper called Cancer and Spirituality and a underutilized resource for cancer care in India. Why do I say this? When I started working as a volunteer psychiatrist in Sri Shankara Cancer Hospital, there was a psychiatrist and a psychiatric social worker who said that, look, people don't come to us. I said, no, they will not come to us. We have to go to them because they have got too many things to challenge. Cancer, you have the fear of death, you have pain, you have stigma, you have the economic problems, all sorts of things. Then you have body changes, when you have surgery. How are they going to think of mental health is important? So what I did was a different thing. Instead of asking them, what is your problem? How can I help? I asked them a different question. I said to them, how has your life changed? And what has helped you? Only after hearing them, I went into helping them. What came out was very, very interesting. Uniformly, everyone said their life has changed dramatically. They are worried. They think about all the things about leaving the family, dying, suffering, and other things. And what helped them, they said, was spirituality. This came spontaneously. Who was having severe pain said, I tolerate pain, thinking of Sri Ramana Maharshi. I said, how? Oh, when Ramana Maharshi had cancer, when someone asked him, do you have pain? He said, my body has pain, I don't have pain. Another person who was in the end of life situation said, I find hope reading Sundar Kanda. Like Sita in Ashokvan, I feel I am also in a helpless situation, but I think like Hanuman, something will happen and I'll get better. Another person said beautifully, who was a young person with cancer, possibly in the audience in this session, said, I don't have worry about recurrence because fear and faith don't go together. Beautiful. I still remember I was overtaken by this thing. When I asked details, she said, look, Krishna and Balaram were passing through the forest, and one decided to sleep, other one was awake. And when Balaram was awake, the demon came. Balaram got worried and anxious and fearful, and the demon got bigger and bigger and bigger. While when Krishna was awake and the demon came, Krishna was not afraid and did not show fear, and the demon became small and disappeared. So similarly, fear and faith don't go together, doctor. I have faith in my religion and other things work there. Another one of my colleagues who was in a terminal stage, whom I was looking after, when I asked him, how do you think of death? He said, look, Dr. Murthy, Hiranyakashipu, Ravana thought that they will not die, they had to die. Similarly, death is a part of life. Again, very interesting that he chose a spiritual story to help him. Similarly, a lady with a lot of guilt about not giving her kidney to her brother, I told her the story of Kisa Gautami and Gautam Buddha, and with that, she was able to get over the guilt and get on to resolve her grief. Another very academically oriented senior person in a terminal illness stage told me, Dr. Murthy, all of you, what you are doing in this hospital is not as effective as what I do every evening with my husband. I said, what do you do? She said, I read Bhagavatam for about an hour. That gives me solace. Specifically, the way Parikshit handled his 7-day life when he was in an end-of-life situation because of the curse by the sage. So I can go on and go on, talk about it. And what I'm trying to say is, as you heard in the beginning of the things, that pain is the gateway to, pain is the key that opens the gates of strength. It is the high road that leads to the city of beatitude. You have examples available all around us from every religion. For example, I have a dear classmate of mine who has a son who is about 45 years old now, and she has looked after him, and she has written a beautiful story how her Christianity, her faith stood by her in every crisis, and she came a winner in this one. And so every religion offers an opportunity for this one. There is a group in Karnal, Dr. Kalra, who specializes on using Bhagavad Gita in cancer, and it's a fantastic one. Time doesn't allow me to go into more details. I will move forward, and those who want it, I'll be happy to send the paper. I told you about cardiac arrest, that means heart attacks in the common sense. People who are spiritual, when they have a cardiac heart attack, they recover faster. They have 50% less chance of having a second heart attack within 1 year compared to those who are not spiritual. I can go on. And the last book, the most recent book of spirituality and health from Duke University is 1,200 pages long, and it just came out in February. So there is enormous evidence. There is almost amount of interest. Now, immediately you will say, if this is true, Dr. Murthy, tell us a little bit more about how can we practice it beyond the idea of going to temple, mosque, gurudwara, or a church, or doing some other things. Now, there are about a dozen activities which are all spiritual, which are all practicable. As I mentioned it, this is available as a book, The Book of Joy by Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. They wrote this a couple of years back before Desmond Tutu passed away. It's an excellent book which combines scientific basis of 10 ways you can find happiness, and also the religious basis for practicing that, and a very, very practical book. I'll just use 2 examples in the time available to illustrate it. For example, how do you practice gratitude? Is it just simply say that, look, thank God, or thank my family, or thank my guru? No, there are specific steps that you can practice it. There are many methods, but one of them gives 3 steps. One is to keeping a gratitude journal. That means every day, either in the morning or in the evening, you write down for yourself that I am grateful in my life for X, Y, Z. It could be something good happen or something routine that happened, but you recall and document it for yourself. Secondly, take the time out to write a letter to someone who is significant in your life. Family member, a friend, a colleague, or someone whom you met on the train or the plane, and send it to the person, and if possible, communicate with the person. Third method is giving thanks. Do your activity rather than in a routine manner. As I told you, in CMC, before every meal, there would be prayer to thank the food that God has given before you start eating. So giving thanks with feeling, like I really appreciate that you took time to come and see me, or your visit made a big difference. Or instead of saying, when you go for a walk to someone, saying that, oh, you walk very fast, I feel very bad, I can't walk so fast. You say, you are an inspiration for me. I am trying to imitate you. And it's always possible to find something significant. As I said, I have so much in life to be thankful. And if you can practice this every day, as I said, you can have 10% less chance of dying due to heart problems and developing other problems. Forgiveness. There is a lot of literature because forgiveness is an important part of all religions, especially Christianity. What happens is that when you do not forgive, either your own actions or that of others or situations, what happens is that it acts as a continuous nidus, a nucleus that keeps causing problems to your body system. The harmony in the body gets disturbed. And you can get over this by practicing forgiveness. I'll give 5 steps which are practicable. First and foremost is to acknowledge such a hurt is there within oneself, either with oneself or with a relationship or a situation. Secondly, not just acknowledge it intellectually, but acknowledge it emotionally. Talk about it, express it. If you cannot do it in front of other people because it's not easy to talk about it, write about it. But bring out the emotions. How did you feel at that time? What else meant through it? Then replace it with a reservoir of positive emotions. Okay, this has happened. My divorce occurred, or I don't have a very good job, or I have a serious illness, but I'm still alive. You know the story about the person who did not have shoes, and when he saw someone without a leg, then he said that, look, at least I have legs. So it's possible to find a positive emotions in every situation. And more important, fourth one is develop empathy for the self and others. Not sympathy, but empathy to put yourself in other person's situation or yourself and experience it. And most important, be kind to yourself. All of these are practicable. There are a number of books, videos, and I'll be happy to provide all of this material to anyone who is interested. Very interestingly, my friend Dr. Shyam Sundar, who retired as Professor of Psychiatry, has written and compiled hundreds of stories of Indian mythology, which we can use it for the psychotherapeutic paradigms. Let me just read 1 or 2 stories for you. Before I do that, I want to share with you the wisdom of India. Forgive me for being a little patriotic or whatever you want to call it, because there is no other philosophy which offers so much for health in general and mental health in particular. I am not saying it alone. Another story for you. In 1956, a Swiss psychiatrist by name Erna Hawk came to India. She was in her mid-30s. She stayed on till 1986 and immersed herself for 32 years in Indian psychiatry in general and Indian psychological methods of treatment, and written extensively. She has written a book, which I don't think I will ever be able to write it, called Sources and Resources, still available in Amazon for 400 rupees, where she says, a Western psychiatrist search for meaning in the ancient Indian scriptures. And she concludes, I want to read this statement, it's a very important one, opposite of what Descartes has said. There is hardly any discovery of modern Western psychotherapy that can't quite easily be confirmed by some percept, parable, or proverb from the writings of Indian philosophy, Indian religion and philosophy. And in this book that I mentioned to you, she has quoted more Upanishads than even I have thought of, and done it in a meticulous manner. And this statement coming from her is a true wisdom of our ancient ages. I'm coming to the end of my presentation so that we have some time for discussion. You will immediately say, as it happens to all of us doctors, when a patient comes, okay, doctor, you say I have got diabetes, I've got hypertension, I've got arthritis, and I've got asthma. What should I do? So similarly, you would ask me, what should I do in my life situation without a health issue, or with a health issue, or with a caregiver issue? I'll give you, summarize what I have experienced and understood in the last 60 years as a doctor, 50 years as a psychiatrist. I see that all of us will experience spirituality differently. It is something like going to the Marina Beach in Madras. You'll see a large number of people, thousands of people on the beach, enjoying the scenery, enjoying the cool breeze, enjoying the sunset. Few people will dip their feet into the water. Still fewer will jump into the things and swim. Very few people will wear goggles and go underneath and see the world underneath. Spirituality is like that. All of us will not be able to do the ultimate. And further, spirituality is a journey, not a destination. So what can we do if I'm a person with an ordinary family, I have no health problems? My suggestion or a request or direction is, make spirituality an important part of your family life. Teach it to your children from the beginning. Besides puja, rituals, and other things, the connection with a larger force, larger universe, larger reality, what some people call it as transcendence, make it a part of their growing up, and that will give them the resilience to face problems of their day-to-day life, either personal problems, illness problems, social problems, international problems. All of these they will experience it, but if they are resilient, they will be able to handle it better than otherwise. As I said, there are enormous amount of books available how to practice spirituality depending your taste. It could be any of that 12 that I read out, and I will read it out again for you. It could be teaching acceptance, could be gratitude, which we discussed it, teaching hope, forgiveness, we discussed it, generosity, surrender, volunteerism, meditation, so on and so on. If you are a person with no health problems, an adult, make it a point. The same way today we do exercise, we do sleep hygiene, we do nutrition care, make it a point to practice spirituality in the way you want to do it. It could be rituals, it could be reading books, it could be doing good for others or understanding things from a philosophical point. That's your choice. But make it a point to look at life both from the physical, psychological, social, economic, and spiritual angles. If you have a health problem, there you really have a very urgent need and a possibility to maximize your treatment by making spirituality an important part of it. I have seen it. I have learned from a large number of people who came in contact with me with cancer, caregivers, and I've learned a lot and benefited a lot from myself. One dramatic one I still remember, possibly in the audience, who I was called saying that this person wants euthanasia and it's 10 years and the person is still living. One of the important reasons is the spirituality component of it. I'm not saying spirituality is a cure. I'm not at all making the point, but it really gave a purpose and a meaning and an activity to follow. So if you have a health problem, the same way you take medicines, the same way you get your blood test done, the same way you control your diet or whatever it is, include a spiritual dimension into it, and you will find that your illness control will be better and will be more effective, and your quality of life will be better. If you are a caregiver, Rosalind Carter, the president's wife, Jimmy Carter's wife, said, everyone is a caregiver. Either we are caregiving or will be requiring caregiving or will become caregivers. So if you are a caregiver, look at caregiving as a way of finding meaning and purpose. Again, the last story of my talk is of Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist in Austria, and he had an opportunity to go to America, migrate to America during the concentration camp period of Hitler. But because his parents were being taken to the concentration camp, he decided to go with them and be in the concentration camp. There, as a psychiatrist, he noticed a lot of things. But the thing that impressed him most was people who had a purpose of life were able to handle the worst aspects of the concentration camp. He has written a beautiful book about finding meaning, Man in Search of Meaning, and you will find that people who had a purpose of life were able to come out of the concentration camp as winners. And he called it as logotherapy. That means meaning therapy. For the next 50 years, practiced it. And it's a beautiful illustration that when you think of your role as a caregiver, you will be better able to handle it and think of including spirituality. You could go to your scriptures, Bible, Gita, Quran, you see it in the back of me, or you could go to your guru, or the priest, or a mullah, or anyone else, or you could go to a wise person, but find a way of practicing spirituality every day. And if you were to do that, you will experience what I read out earlier to you, that pain is the gateway for beatitude, as was said by Sri Aurobindo. I end by saying that Descartes probably did something very unwise or stupid by separating church and science. But today, science and church, science and church or the religion, spirituality is coming back with tremendous force, with tremendous amount of integration, that both are related to each other. With these words, I want to end up saying that spirituality is not kattukate, maya mantra, blind belief, superstition. Spirituality is a force which is available to each one of us to activate, maximize, and get the fruits of it. Thank you very much for each one of you for joining this one. And I'm sure many of you would like to share your experiences or raise questions which we can carry on together as a collective group. Thank you very much.